This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, Isotope, Native Instruments, Lewitt, and Grace Design. You're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt Pure Tube microphone through the Grace Design M201 Mark II mic pre mixed through Isotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar, all on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show, and there's some great deals waiting for you there. Now get ready to rock.
The people who owned all this crazy property out there, their intentions were to use it as like a event space or something like that. But somehow they got into the idea of building a recording studio. So the great thing about it is old wood. There's so much old wood, and then there's like stone in there. Man, it just sounds so good.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Look, if you're like me, then you love having cool instruments in your studio, right? No matter what style of music you make, Native Instruments gives your studio all the instruments and sounds you need, from drums, loops, and beats to the coolest synthesizers, realistic strings, guitar amps, and futuristic synth pads. I love recording and tracking real bands in my studio, but then adding awesome overdubs from Contact, Massive X, Super 8, Battery, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid Keys, for example. Use the code ROCK10 now to get 10% off, or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples, all over at nativeinstruments.com. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Howdy, rock stars. I'm Lid Shaw, your host, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Al Evans, a multi-instrumentalist, engineer, producer, artist, and record label owner based in Western Massachusetts. Al's been making music on stage and in the studio for over 30 years, most notably with his band Soulive, as well as with artists like Oteil Burbridge, John Scofield, George Porter Jr., Karl Denson, Ivan Neville, and Reggie Watts, to name a few. I noticed Moon Boot Lover wasn't listed on there, so I'm going to include that too, man.
Cool, all right.
That's way back when we met. Al's been a guest on the podcast previously for episodes RSR183 and RSR339, to talk about recording at his studio Ironwax. And today we get to talk about his recent production for Oteil Burbridge, Lovely View of Heaven, recorded in Iceland of all places, and recording new material with his band Soulive and other projects that are going on, cool things happening since the last time we spoke. So please welcome back Al Evans to Recording Studio Rockstars. Al, my man, are you ready to rock, dude?
Man, the third time here, so if I'm not ready to rock by now, like
third time's a charm, right?
I get, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm ready.
I mean, they did say it was a magic number, at least, once or twice. I think I heard that.
Yeah, that's right, man. De La Soul, right?
That's
3
right.
Is the magic number.
Was that, didn't that come at us through Sesame Street before that, though? Or something like that?
There might have been, I think that was it wasn't Sesame Street. It might have been like the Electric Company or one of those joints. But yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely De La Soul was where it landed on my radar and stuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Those were great records, man. Did that stuff inspire you just like as a drummer? I mean,
man, it is everything. I mean, so that was, man, it was so great to go back and listen to all of those records when they released them on streaming, because it took like a long time. And I mean, those albums, especially the early ones, were just, I mean, seminal for us. You know what I mean? Just in terms of just music and culture. That whole era of hip hop was just incredible. Like Tribe, De La, I mean, you can go down the list, but just like the conscious hip hop of that era was just, and obviously De La was just mind blowing when they came out. It was, you never heard anything like it. So, it was a big part of just life.
Well, what do you think were some of the tools that they were using back at that point for looping stuff and creating those kind of sounds? It's just like, was it Akai samplers at that point, or was it MPC? Probably it's all Akai, right?
I mean, it was probably before. I honestly, I don't know, but I'm assuming it was definitely before MPC. Like, so I would say probably the SP1200, kind of vibe. Who knows what they were.
Thank God for the Japanese, man. Where would we be in music if it wasn't for Japan?
Man, for real, man. I mean, so like back in the day, like a good friend of mine, I remember he had that first Casio keyboard that had the sampling, what could you like?
Yeah, SK1.
Like, exactly.
I got it sitting in the studio, man, and the SK5 to go with it. That's got laser beam and the lion sound.
Yes. So, we were doing our thing, making hip hop tracks back in the day, like using that thing, but yeah, I mean, so anyway, so like cats like De La and like Tribe were just hugely inspirational and influential to us, So
I remember when I was at Smart Studios, Butch Vig's place, producing. That was the point at which they were doing all the Garbage records, and they were upstairs, and they were hot right then. So they were collaborating with everybody and doing co-writes and things for films and stuff. And there was this great story that came down to us about how they were scheduled to do something with Tricky, and Tricky was sort of, I think Tricky's attitude was sort of like, just do whatever, And so apparently he came to the session and brought a Casio SK1 and was just like, this is it. This is all we're going to use on the whole song. Let's go. And they were just like, oh boy, or something like that.
Yeah. I hear that. That's
but those are great, man. I love using them. We have all these incredible tools with like modern software synthesizers, and like the computer is always telling us like anything's possible, but it's so much fun to just grab like an old, plastic kid's keyboard and just play the melody on that, and it always stands out and sounds cooler than you think,
Yeah, exactly. I hear that.
So speaking of studios, I think you've had some changes since the last time I saw you, right? Tell us a little bit about what's going on in your world in studio.
Yeah, well, so Ironwax Studios is no more. Kim and I closed the doors on that back in April. And there was a few things leading up to it. It was actually a lot of things leading up to it. But it was, I'm not even going to say bittersweet. It was sweet. I was so excited I'm not actually one to like kind of like dwell on the past and all this kind of stuff. It was a great spot when I had it. Did some amazing things, but it was just time to move on. And honestly, the biggest inspiration in doing that was actually going to Iceland and working with Oteil on his album there. I'm sure, and we'll get into that. But the crazy thing about closing the studio. So I spoke to the building manager, and Kim and I had made the decision, and we were like, all right, let's just close it, and cool, we'll just move on, and I'm going to work out of other studios, just kind of freelance. And then I have my mix and mastering room here at home, But anyway, so I was like, all right, well, I have a session. I knew I had a session for my Alan Evans trio, AE3. And that was going to be the last thing that I did at Ironwax. And the date had already been set months before because, just everyone's availability and all that. So I'm like thinking one day, I'm like, man, talking about going back in time and thinking about the past. But I was like, I was thinking about the very first thing that I recorded in the studio. And that was with Neil, my brother Neil, Oteil, and his brother Kofi. And there's like a little, maybe a year or so before Kofi passed. So anyway, I said, man, let me just go see what the date was on when we did that session. This freaked me out. So I opened up iCal, I'm just going back. Oh yeah, here's it was 7 years. The first session was exactly 7 years to the date of my last session.
Wow.
At Ironwax. And I didn't even plan that. You know what I mean? It just so happened to be. And on top of that, really the inspiration for closing the studio was Oteil. You know what I mean? So it kind of started with that session with Oteil, and really the last session wasn't with Oteil, but that's what inspired me closing the studio.
What was the first session? Is that one in your discography?
No, but you know what? I'll throw a tune in there. So actually, thanks for reminding me of that. I will there was a session that we did because for years, Oteil, Kofi, Neil, and I were talking about doing something together. So finally, we just made it happen. Kofi was over in Australia with Derek and Susan, and he came to the studio right from Australia. So he showed up. He was just all backwards. You know what I mean? Like, and can't remember where Oteil came from.
You mean like time change?
Time change. Yeah, exactly. So, and so we're just hanging out like in between takes. Like Kofi would straight up be asleep at the keyboards, and we're like talking through stuff, and he's just kind of half asleep, nodding his head, and it was like, all right, man, we're gonna hit record, and he just pop up, wake up, and just start playing, and just just amazing. Yeah. But anyway, so we recorded. I don't even remember how many tunes we recorded, and we basically recorded a lot of rhythm tracks. And we were writing on the spot. I mean, I think maybe I brought an idea, Neil brought an idea, and maybe each of us brought an idea. I think that's what it was. Yeah. But we needed to build on them after the session. So Kofi laid down piano and flute. He kind of came up with a melody for this one tune and finished it all up. Unfortunately, he passed away soon after that. So we have all these other tunes that Oteil and I have been talking about finishing. So that was, after he passed away, I just, I didn't listen to the stuff. I just kind of, it was just a little too much emotionally.
A little too raw.
Yeah, exactly. But now there's, some time gone by and so we're excited to dig back into it. But like I said, there is one song that was completed. So I will add it to that playlist.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, and like hearing you describe a session too, like the idea of showing up and like, I had an idea, he had an idea. What does that mean on a session like that for you guys? That's like somebody's got a starter idea, and then what would be a typical fleshing it out or arranging it? And would you guys actually write down a chart or anything, or is it all just in your heads?
No, it would pretty much be all in our heads. So, and they were, each idea were in various stages of completion, but they were all really just ideas. And so one idea that I had already recorded just by myself, just by probably bass, drums, and guitar. So I just played it, and they're like, oh, okay, cool, got it. And then from there, we just started working it out. Oh, this could be better. I'm going to try this, and it just comes together. The other tunes, I honestly don't even remember, but yeah, I don't remember any charts or anything like that. I mean, nothing, just And that was the great thing about the four of us playing. And we actually did a couple of shows after that, which was really incredible. But and those were recorded as well, which is anyway. But
got to go get those. I can see the wheels turning.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we're all like that. It's like, oh yeah, that record. I got to go finish that one.
I'm telling you, man. But the cool thing about it was like Neil and I have always had like this kind of telepathic communication going on musically and just in life or whatever, but especially musically.
Yeah.
Same with Oteil and Kofi. But the weird thing was when the four of us played together, we all had it. It was, and that really kind of freaked us out. Like it was something really special. So being in the studio, it's like you don't even have to, again, you didn't have to write anything down. We didn't even have to think about, the form. We just all knew where we were all going before we knew it. So
yeah, there's a fascinating thing that happens when you're making music where it's like your minds are connected. Like your own internal thinking is happening for the other people too. And you kind of know what to expect and you listen. There's a listening that happens too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what it's all listening. It's all listening. It's all reacting. But it's also you're adding your own vibe to it. And it's all happening at the same time. It's fascinating. And I've been doing this my entire life with Neil, and it still bugs me out.
So how's everybody connected? How is it that you guys are all close, and like what's the history?
Well, so I'm trying to think if Neil was there. So back in the Moon Boot days, I remember initially a really good friend of mine, this cat Max, who's a guitarist in this band. They were out of Burlington, Vermont. Moon Boot and his band used to do a lot of shows together. One night, and we used to stay at their house, after the gigs, when we were just broke musicians. So we were just crashing on floor. You know the deal. So anyway, I remember one night we were hanging out after a gig, and he was like, "Oh man, you got to hear this band, Aquarium Rescue Unit." I was like, cool. That's a crazy name. I don't know.
Wait, who said that? Who
Max, the guitarist. Okay. So, and since he was a guitarist, he was especially focused on Jimmy. And he was like, man, there's this one tune and you should hear this guitar solo. It feels like it's like a half hour long, but the guitar solo, and I remember he literally timed it, and it was something crazy like 13 seconds, 13.7 seconds or whatever it was. I think it was on Time Is Free. It was the live ARU album. And that came out, what was it? Capricorn Records, I think it was back in the day.
This was like early 90s, right?
Early 90s.
This is when I used to go see him play. They'd come through Murfreesboro and everything.
Right. So, it was Sipe, Oteil, Colonel, Matt Mundy, the whole crew, Jimmy. And I'm listening to this and we all freaked out because I'd never heard anything like it. It was like, I grew up listening to fusion, like Mahavishnu Orchestra. So it felt like it was from that school, but there was something also Southern about it. You know what I mean? Like it had like a Southern rock thing.
Yeah, and is that Jimmy?
Well, yeah, Oteil at the time was living down in Birmingham, Alabama. So they had they definitely had some Southern, roots to to the band and to the music, but it was also fusion. And so anyways, just listen to this is incredible. And not long after that, we had an opportunity to open for ARU down at the Cat's Cradle in
that's in
not Charlotte,
North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina, but where UNC is.
Yep.
What was that town?
I'll think of it in just 1 sec. I'll tell you.
Yeah, because the deal.
I was there.
Yeah, exactly. So we opened up for Chapel Hill. Thank you. So we opened up for ARU, and I just, we did our thing, whatever. And then they played the show. And after that show in particular, I'll never forget, because I just remember standing there listening to Oteil and Jimmy in particular freaked me out because he was playing faster than I could think. You know, like you listen to a guitarist or any instrumentalist, soloing, and like, okay, I can dig. Oh, they're quoting that, or I can dig that. This dude was like, I couldn't process like what he was playing fast enough. It just bugged me out. So anyway, after the gig, we're hanging out. They had like you remember back in the day, everyone was buying up the airport shuttles and like turning them into like their own little tour buses. They had the bunks and all this kind of stuff. So I remember being we went on their airport shuttle, and that was like the first time I'd actually been on one. And I thought those dudes were like rolling, you know what I mean? That was like, like, wow, man, we're rolling in a van with a trailer, and these dudes have an airport shuttle that's hooked up. So anyway, we were just like hanging out, talking, and just immediately there was something about that. I just remember Oteil just like, we just hit it off. All of us, we hit it up, but especially Oteil, and there was just something there, and I remember him always telling me about, oh man, well, wait till you meet my brother Kofi, and so it took a little while. It was a little while after that when we met Kofi and that all. But it was like family right from the get go. When you meet certain people, like, oh yeah, it was like we'd known each other our entire lives.
Yeah.
And it's, So, and we've been tight ever since.
Colonel Bruce was such a character too, man. He was a trip. When I went down and did my Bonnaroo studio the very first year in 2005, he was brought in as the interviewer, and he was sitting in the studio interviewing everybody. And like, what was when you stepped onto the airport shuttle, did he try and guess your birthday?
Not then. But he did later on Jam Cruise one time, and actually that was Colonel Bruce was something special. He was like Oteil always says, he's an alien. He was an alien for sure.
Nice, man. Nice.
Yeah.
Adam Audio's S-Series, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors featuring 5 models from the compact S2V all the way up to the powerful S5H. The range builds on Adam Audio's iconic heritage with new technology for improved acoustic performance. With new woofers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine, the S-Series ensures accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail, and a forward-looking digital connectivity. Backed by a 5-year guarantee, Adam Audio monitors embody durability and professional sound for your studio at adamaudio.com. All right, we got dogs barking in the background, Rockstar. That's cool. So hopefully they'll make it onto the show here and join us. All right, cool. So now, if we fast forward a little bit, you and Oteil just went off to make an incredible record and do something really special. And I know that Oteil, of course, has had, a big career arc from that time you met him to making this new record too.
Well, yeah, we could start there. I mean, like I said, like we met when he was doing ARU, which was incredible. Then he went on, then he was doing like the Oteil and the Peacemakers, obviously the Allman Brothers, which, I heard on his podcast recently that I guess he was the longest standing member in the bass chair of the Allman Brothers, which is pretty incredible. I didn't know that. I mean, I knew he had been doing it for a while, but that was pretty cool to hear.
Wow.
So then, he did Allman Brothers and then Dead and Company. I mean, that's just absolutely, that's rare air. You know what I'm saying? Like, to be in 2 iconic bands. I mean, that just doesn't even make sense. And then I've been learning throughout this process of really digging in, obviously working on the album with Oteil, the connections between the Allman Brothers and the Grateful Dead. Like on the surface, I never would even guess that there were so many similarities or just, but it's been really fun learning all this history and these connections between the two bands from Oteil. It's just fascinating, really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's also fascinating that this musical path from, funk and jam band stuff into essentially Southern rock and, folk rock.
Exactly. And
the way those things all mix together.
Exactly. And it's really, it's fun hearing Oteil talk about it. I was reading this book, The Surrender Experiment. And it's an incredible book. Unfortunately, I'm spacing on the author's name, but it's worth checking out. And the premise of it is this guy who was it started out, he was looking to we all have a voice in our head. You're just like kind of hanging out, talking with people, but there's always like a dialogue going on in your own head. And he went on this mission to try and silence that. So it started off, and I don't want to give away too much for anyone who hasn't read the book, but it just started off as him meditating and trying to just silence that voice and just find inner peace, I guess, or whatever,
Yeah.
And the story, just why it's called the surrender experiment, because throughout his life he discovered that if he just again surrendered to whatever was presented to him, any kind of experience or opportunity, and especially something that would be out of his comfort zone, or something that just didn't seem that he would be comfortable with, or he would just go with it. He would surrender and just see what the universe is telling him. Yo, this is the path, so follow it. And a lot of times we're being told or suggested, here's the path, or this is and we fight it. And so anyway,
so that was a book in the author you were talking about?
The book, and it's called The Surrender Experiment.
Yeah, and when you talk about fighting it too, the first thought that popped into my head was we're stuck hanging on to the possibly the immediate past.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, this is what I was just doing, so this is what I do, and we maybe fight the new direction.
Exactly. Or a lot of it is tied to ego. This is who I am. This is what I like, and or this is a tradition I follow. So I'm not going to go down this path. Or so anyway, with Oteil, you mentioned, and that's what made me think of that book, is he could have easily just stayed in that lane of playing fusion, funk, or whatever, but the universe had other plans for him, and he just, instead of fighting it, and he just jumped on board, and look where he is now. It's just incredible. And we talked a lot about that in the studio and in the process of this making his album. And I don't want to, I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but even for myself, I remember the first time I heard The Dead, and man, nope, I was not feeling it at all. I knew of The Dead because I was a big Jimi Hendrix fan growing up, so I knew the 60s culture. I knew they existed, but until I actually heard the music, I was like, no, there's
the thing about the Grateful Dead, I'm glad you went there, because of course, question is, are you a Dead fan? How many shows have you seen? But the thing about the Grateful Dead is there was so much, there was kind of few records, but so much recorded music that's put out there. Historically, there's far more examples of them singing out of tune. Right. In a moment or something like that somebody might be likely to hear the very first time they discover them.
Yeah, true. Yeah, exactly. Or, and that's where I started to learn from friends who were really into them. It was like, people were like, that was the whole thing. It was like, people who followed them or on the road, they were just like chasing that chasing that. People, at least, I don't want to speak for everyone, but Dead fans, but the Dead fans I knew, say in the early 90s, who were explaining this to me, and I still didn't understand it then, but they were like, yeah, we know some of the shows are just, they're not great, but the next one might be because the last one, 3 shows ago was amazing. So it was like, they're just like chasing the dragon kind of thing, So anyway, but my point is that when I was presented the opportunity to produce this album, I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm not into the Dead at all. Like, I don't know their songs and this, but Oteil said, look, man, I want you there because I like what you do. I like how you, and I know we're going to do something great together. You know what I mean? Like, so instead of me saying, nah, man, like I'm not the one for that, I just surrendered. I went with it. And it was, I kid you not. It changed the trajectory of my life. Like I said, I had mentioned the closing the studio and all that kind of stuff, but it really, that's part of it. But again, just surrendering to that experience, to that path was just incredible. And I've learned so much, and I have such a great appreciation now for that music.
Yeah. Well, you probably had to take a good close look at it and study it.
Well, the first thing I did was ask Oteil to send me the lyrics.
Let's back up for a second.
Sure, yeah.
The rock stars know. What are we talking about? What is the new record that you guys just went and did?
Okay, thank you. So the new record is an album of ballads written. They were Jerry Garcia and Robert Hunter ballads, and they're just beautiful songs. And for me, it's the song comes first. I don't care what instrument you're playing or what kind of mic pre, all that stuff doesn't matter. If the song is whack, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. I don't care. And these songs, again, that's why I asked Oteil to send me the lyrics, because I just wanted to read them. And the other thing that I did, I found as many studio recordings or versions of the songs we were going to record, and I listened to them just once, because I didn't want to be influenced by. I knew right from the get-go, it's like, hey, if I'm coming in to record and produce this thing, it's not going to be like anything that anybody else has done, including
it's not going to be a throwback.
No, it's going to be its own thing. And Oteil was totally down with that, So, but just reading the lyrics. Oh, I just printed them. He sent them to me. I printed them and I just read them over and over. And of course, I was making notes of because he recorded demos. So I was like writing notes on those sheets of paper with ideas. But just reading the lyrics was just mind blowing.
Yeah. What talk a little bit about some of the things that struck you in the lyrics. What is it fair to ask, what were they writing about?
Well, yeah. Well, I never, yeah. I mean, what is any artist writing about? I don't know. And I honestly feel that once you release something into the world, it's no longer yours. It's for everybody else to interpret. And that's so I don't know exactly what. With that said, I'm sure there are some hardcore Dead fans out there who probably know the backstories to where Robert Hunter was,
sure.
Whatever. I get that. But even with all that, I never assume that that's correct information or even pertinent information.
Hey, Rockstar, come on over here. I've got a secret to tell you. Want to know how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars? Well, my secret is using iZotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar to make this podcast sound great. Right now, you are hearing RX Breath Control, Declick, Declip, DS, Deplosive, Voice Denoise, Ozone Multiband Compression, Neutron EQ, and Limiting, all from iZotope. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off over at iZotope.com. What about the mood of the lyrics? I mean, one of the notes I wrote down just listening to China Doll, I just wrote a murder ballad.
Well, it's interesting. So the one thing that I picked up from that body of work, or at least this album, it's very for me it was very visual. It's very you know what I'm saying? Like it really like brought me in and took me somewhere. Again, it was my own experience based on listening to my interpretation of these lyrics, but it wasn't surface. They're not. None of these tunes are surface. They're deep. They're deep dives into human emotion and it just kind of rocked my world.
There's a quality of hopeful sadness in Grateful Dead songs,
Exactly. And so what I was really excited about, I remember at the end of the session, I'm sure we may get into the nuts and bolts of things, but
we will.
Yeah. But I remember at the end of the session, just sitting there with Oteil, and I was just kind of laughing. We were talking with some other people, and I was like, man, it's so incredible that I'm sitting here like I was just not a Dead fan at all. I mean, I played with Phil Lesh in the past or whatever, but I just wasn't a Dead fan. But I had become one because I felt, this is me personally just speaking, of course, but it was like the first time I could listen and hear the music, or hear the songs, I should say. Whereas I felt like in the past with me, so much of the Dead thing, just the whole thing for me personally, again, got in the way of me and being able to dig in and enjoy it. Whereas,
I don't think you're alone. I think it's true of a lot of people.
But I thought that was the beautiful thing about Oteil's album. I was like, man, and it's been the case that a lot of Deadheads, once the album came out, love the album, and that's great. But the thing is, people which I knew was going to happen, at least I was hopeful was going to happen, people who were in my same position, who were not into the Dead, were hitting me up saying, yo, this album is incredible. I love this music, because it was presented in a way, it's just in a different light. It was, saying, like, it wasn't.
I just got that recently. I went to a show and I ran into some old friends from 30 years ago. And he was raving about this record.
Oh man, that's great, man. The one thing I wanted to do, I was talking with Kim about this when we were on a walk one day. We were just talking about she loves the album, which is awesome. But this is my wife, everyone. But I said, the one thing I wanted to do, and I was so happy that Oteil was down with it, and I never even mentioned it to him, but I wanted to make sure the vocal was up front. Like you could hear it. And this, Lidge, man, when you work with a lot of people who are in various levels of comfort with their own voice. We're speaking specifically vocalists. And there's so many times, man, when you get that, oh man, can you put like a phaser or something and put the vocal back? And I'm like, oh damn, man. I understand, because maybe it's like their first time singing on an album or whatever, and they're self-conscious about their voice, so you end up bearing it. Now the thing that with this music, I could have put I could have buried the vocal in with everything else, because the majority of people who are going to listen to it, well, I'm not going to say, I don't want to say that, but a lot of people who would listen to it already know the songs.
Right.
So
Right.
so you don't, you know what I'm saying? So the vocal wouldn't have to be so upfront because they just already know it. So in
They're
their
singing
mind,
it in their head.
they're singing it. So the vocal sounds upfront to them. That's not even a concern. But I wanted to make sure two things. Oteil has a beautiful voice. Now, this was the first album that Oteil was going to be singing lead on in his career, like from front to back. The first album Oteil was going to be singing lead on. So in the studio, there was a few things I was helping him out with in terms of coaching it just needed to happen. And he did an amazing job. You know what I'm saying? But I wanted to make sure his voice was just up in your face, not annoyingly, because I wanted to make sure people who didn't know the songs could hear and feel these lyrics, because it was so important to me. You know what I mean? So I'm so glad that when I I got back from Iceland, and I was going to wait like a few weeks to dive into it. But, you know, man, I just well, let me make sure the files everything's cool. And then, you would step after step. Next thing I knew, I was like in a mix. So I sent it to Oteil, and not once did he say, "Oh, can you bring the vocal back?" He was like, "Oh, it sounds great, man." I was like, "Oh, we're on. It's on. It's on."
Yeah.
So
that's great, man. You guys all went to Iceland. Of all places, you went to Iceland to go record this, but then afterwards you brought it all back with you,
right,
and mixed it at your place. So let's talk about Iceland a little bit. What was this? And I just wanted to make one comment, because you mentioned Phil Lesh, who had one of the greatest bumper stickers that was made about him. Remember, there was the beer commercial about great taste, less filling.
Yeah.
There was a bumper sticker that said "Great bass, less filling."
Damn, man. Yeah. Wow.
All right. So tell us about Iceland. Why'd you guys go? Why'd you guys almost go off the edge of the world to go make a record?
Well, it's a really interesting story, actually. So a couple years ago now, Oteil called me one day. I was just hanging around the house, and he gives me a call. He's like, "Hey, Al, what's up, man?" He's like, "Well, I'm working on I'm recording these tunes, and he had some technical. He works in Logic, and he had some technical questions for me about. I literally don't even remember what it was, but I was helping him out. I was like, "Oh, but you should do this and this and that." He's like, "Man, why don't you just engineer? Why don't you just mix this stuff for me?" I was like, "All right, cool, whatever." So he sent me a tune, and I think it might have been Stella Blue. I think it was, but anyway, it was just bass, piano, and vocal. Now this started because during the pandemic, Oteil was at home playing piano and singing as a live stream for his audience. And so once things kind of got back to normal or whatever, he was like really digging the piano, and he started messing around with these ballads, just coming up with arrangements on piano. So he sent me some files, and I mixed it again, bass, piano, and vocal. Sent it to him. He's like, "Oh man, this sounds amazing. Would you maybe I'm planning on recording more of these. Why don't you produce it for me? And maybe you could play drums on a few things." I was like, "All right, cool. Yeah, that sounds good." So right then he sent me a couple other things, and then he went out with Dead & Company. So obviously he was gone all summer doing the thing. And, we stayed in touch a little bit here and there, but like when you're on the road, especially like that, I just let people do their thing. And if they get in touch with me, that's cool, but I'm not trying to hound people. So anyway, he got back, and we kind of talked about getting back into it. So soon after that, his manager, Ben, gave me a call. He said, "Hey, Al, so we're going to record Oteil's album over in Iceland, and he really wants you to record and produce it and mix it." I was like, "All right, cool." So the thing about Iceland that set off a little flag for me, I had a feeling I knew which studio it was. Now, back when I was doing this thing with Eddie Roberts from New Master Sounds, we had a band called Matador Soul Sounds. And towards the end of that little run, I was trying to kind of chill out on being on the road and everything. Eddie calls me up one day. He's like, "Hey, Al, so there's I got asked to help consult on this recording studio, putting this recording studio together, and over in Iceland. And I was wondering if you'd want to help, because I don't really know too much about building recording studios, but he got asked to do this by some friends." I'm like, "Bro, nah, man, I'm not going over to Iceland to build some studio in some dude's basement or something." You know what I mean? Like, I didn't ask too many questions, but I just heard Iceland and like building a recording studio. I was like, "Nah, man, I'm good. I'm good." So anyway, months go by, and I remember Eddie on the New Master Sounds Instagram posted like, "Oh, we're moving the tape machine into the studio." And I'm looking at this place. I'm like, "Yo, that is a real studio." So I'm thinking like, damn, I kind of messed up there. I didn't surrender.
There you go. That was a big surrender.
Exactly. But so the funny thing is, so the New Master Sounds recorded their first album there. It's called Floki Studios. And then they did a couple other things. So when Ben called me, he said, "Hey, Oteil, we're going to record this album over in Iceland." I kind of had a feel. I didn't ask him where, but I was like, "I bet you it's at that spot." And sure enough, it was. So I ended up over there anyway,
That's so funny.
So they reached out. Yeah, so I don't know the exact details of how it all came together on their end, but I was just brought in as what the cool thing is that they have some engineers over there who are, very competent, cats.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
When they kind of set it in the motion, he said that he wanted me there. And so that was amazing. You know what I mean? So, so we went over there, and it is the most magical place I've ever been in my life.
And it's called Floki.
Floki, Floki.
Floki.
Yeah.
Not like the key of the song.
Oh, right.
But no, I was thinking like, when I think of Iceland, I think about like, isn't that the beginning of the journey to the center of the earth? They like wander down into a cave. So you guys were on Journey to the Center of the Song or something.
Pretty
like
much,
that.
man. I mean, we were 50 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. I mean, we were,
wow.
And the studio is on the ocean. I mean, it's you walk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a video of Oteil, the first single that came out, Stella Blue, and they did a kind of like a music video for it or whatever. But all of the like kind of B-roll that you see is literally like right outside the door of the studio. I mean, it's just incredible. So you'd walk outside.
So you had a view of the ocean.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're like probably from the door to the water, maybe not even 50 feet. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the Northern Lights, going off, and yeah. I mean, what?
That's amazing. So yeah. Wow. So Northern Lights. Yeah. So tell us more about the vibe of the place. So it's cold.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it was cold. So we were there in early December. So
okay.
the thing about, I mean, the cold, whatever, we could deal. It wasn't that bad, and
you're inside a studio.
Yeah, anyway. Exactly. Yeah, they had a fire going in the lounge, and it was great. But there was, I think, maybe 4 hours of daylight. I think. At that point,
so it's like perpetual all-nighter.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, but the studio, originally, it's this old building. It was a, for lack of a better term, like a grocery store, but like a kind of, but it's a very hundreds of years old. It's an old building, but at one point it was used as the town's, little store. And then they were the people who owned all this crazy property out there. Their intentions were to use it as like event space or something like that. But somehow they got into the idea of building a recording studio. So the great thing about it is old wood. I mean, there's so much old wood, and then there's like some stone in there. Man, it just sounds so, again, it wasn't designed to be a studio, and they didn't do like a lot of like acoustic, they just kind of put gear in the spot, you know what I mean, and did a few things, but they didn't go over the top. But it just sounds so good.
What do songwriters, music producers, DJs, EDM, TV, and film composers all have in common with you and me? We all need incredibly cool sounds that instantly transport the music we are creating to the style that we want. This is why Native Instruments is your ultimate toolkit with a massive library of sounds for your studio. Whether you want to create hip-hop, indie pop, classic rock, meditation music, pumping dance floor beats, or full orchestral arrangements, Native Instruments' complete bundle offers you everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to wild synths, ultra-realistic strings, and vintage electric bass, guitars, and keys. The list goes on and on. I personally love recording real bands in my studio and then adding cool drum samples, synths, and futuristic keys from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid keys, for example. Plus, it's a great way to make your production sound modern and unique. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com. The S-Series by Adam Audio, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors, blending advanced engineering and in-house design. With 5 models in various sizes and configurations, these monitors build on Adam Audio's iconic heritage while incorporating new technology for improved acoustic performance. The range includes the compact S2V with the 7-inch woofer, the 3-way S3H with twin 7-inch woofers, the vertical S3V with a single 9-inch woofer, and the powerful S5H and S5V main monitors featuring a 12-inch woofer and exceeding 131 dBSPL per pair. Despite differences in size and power, all these models provide highly analytical sound for professional audio applications. The S-Series includes new woofers, mid-range drivers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine for crossover optimization. The result is accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail in bass and mid-frequencies with wider frequency ranges, and forward-looking digital connectivity, all in a durable design. The S-Series ensures longevity in your studio, backed with a 5-year guarantee at adamaudio.com. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, the second half of the show. My guest today is Al Evans, joining us yet again on Recording Studio Rockstars to talk about, right now we're just talking about making records in Iceland with Oteil Burbridge. And you ready to jam, dude?
I'm ready, man.
Speaking of jams, I mean, we're talking about, there's like a whole history of jam band going on in this story.
Really, I know. This is the jam band episode for sure.
So what was the studio? You talked about this incredible, beautiful wood and the stone in there. That I love the sound of, it's sort of funny. It's like if a space is striking when you're in it or when you look at it, it's probably going to sound striking if you record in it in a lot of cases, I think.
That's definitely been my experience,
Probably because probably because the sound of the space also evokes the vision of the space and the feeling of it too.
Right, exactly. I mean, so the cool thing about this album that Oteil really wanted to, he was thinking of like ECM records, like Bright, like Pat Metheny, Bright Size, like that kind of vibe, you know what I mean? And I mean, that was a perfect place to capture it. And I think we did a really good job. Not that that wasn't a conscious, I didn't have it on a sheet of paper there, but just that was what we were thinking of going into it. And it just happened to.
That's like first impression too. I mean, to me, it's a jazz. This is like a jazz ballad record in a way, and who was playing keys on the session?
So Jason Crosby.
Jason Crosby.
He played fiddle and keys or violin.
Right on.
Yeah.
So but then you also had a cellist there too, or
No, that's just Jason.
So Jason does all the string stuff.
Yep.
He just layered it all. Okay, cool. We'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
But the thing that I really noticed that struck me, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, is that the mood of the record seems very set by the piano voicings and Oteil's, his voice. Those two things really, to me, really define the tone and mood of the record.
Exactly. So with that said, going back to where it started with Oteil sitting at the piano, you're right. That's where it started. That's the root of everything, was like, Oteil sitting at the piano and working it all out. So he had like demos of everything. And those guys have played these tunes with Oteil and his band over the years, but that's where it started. It's all about the piano.
Do you think there was a real collaboration between Oteil and Jason just on the specific voicings and stuff like that?
Yeah,
a little more of a like a general direction.
Well, there wasn't. That's the one. Jason has. He has perfect pitch. He's incredible. So he hears something once and he can just play
That's what it is. Yeah.
So So there, so there wasn't a lot of verbal communication going on during the recording of that album. It was just everyone knew what to do.
Did you remember to bring your brushes to the session?
No, but no, there were two cats who played drums on the album.
Oh, cool! For some reason, I was thinking that you had played on it.
No, I didn't play on it, man. So, no, so they brought some brushes. So
right on, man. Okay, well, let's talk about the band a little more.
Okay,
some of the musicians, like what was the lineup? How did you set these guys up to for success in the studio?
So the band was, again, Oteil, Jason Crosby, and then there were two drummers, John Morgan Kimmock, and Pete Levisoli, and then two guitarists, Tom Guarna and Steve Kimmock. So, and Steve is John's father. So the beginning of the session was broke up into basically two bands. So the first half of the session was Tom and Pete playing drums, Tom playing guitar. And then a few days later, the Kimmocks showed up, and then we switched. So the drum set, I set up they had a late 60s Ludwig.
Mm-hmm. And this is in Iceland. So basically Iceland. When the musician freezes solid, then you have to swap them out.
Exactly.
And that's what changes out the band.
Yeah, no doubt. So I set the drums up in a spot that just sounded pretty good. I had guitar, amp, everyone was in the room together. So when it came time to switch rhythm sections or guitar and drums, those dudes, John and Steve just came in and, this sounds great. And just, so we didn't, they maybe, John maybe changed some cymbals, but that was it. I didn't have to move a mic. I didn't have to do anything.
So band standing in a circle kind of thing, or
essentially, yeah. Or they were actually in four corners of the studio, actually.
Right, a bigger studio than this is a bigger space than Ironwax. Similar?
It was definitely bigger. Yeah. And so there was great sight lines. There was perfect amount of bleed. Between
right. So amps are in the same room with drums.
Yeah.
Bass amp too.
There was a bass amp that was recorded that I didn't use in the end, but it was just there. It's just there as a backup, and also just Yeah, exactly. But it's I always like having the bass amp in the room. It just, it kind of helps the vibe, like.
Well, it's interesting thinking about a bass amp in the room where maybe you don't use the mic on it, you use the direct, but it gets possibly picked up as a little bit of bleed in the other mics.
Exactly. And it to me, it just helps create that sense of space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I always go back to, what was it? The Neil Young album, Harvest
Moon. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was done here at Quad Studio.
Not Harvest Moon, but Harvest, right?
Oh, okay,
the original, the first, but exactly. But the thing I always loved about that album is I can't remember what tune it is. So, but we'll have to figure out, but it happened on a few tunes where you could hear the drummer wasn't playing, but you could hear the bass, like was buzz. The bottom of the snare was buzzing.
Yeah.
With every bass note. And you're just like, oh God!
I feel like you hear that on some of the Hendrix records.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. There's tons of records. You know, I mean, that's just, and again, that just gives you a sense that like these cats are in the same room together, and it's very subtle. And most people just wouldn't. We know that.
Yeah.
But the general public doesn't know.
We know that, but we discovered that along the way too.
Exactly.
The first time you hear that, you're like, whoa.
Right.
Or you hear one of my favorites is when you hear the scratch vocal bleeding through. And it sounds like a ghostly double of the re-recorded vocal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
And these are things it's worth interjecting, Rockstars, that these are things that you can stumble on that you discover are really useful in sessions. So your first reaction might be like, oh no, we're hearing it bleed on the drums. That's no good. Or vocals. Oh no, you can't do scratch vocals in there. You might hear it on the drum room mic. But I would encourage you all to try these things in different sessions so you start discovering like, oh no, that sounds really cool and that could work on a record.
Yeah, exactly. And so what was great about it, so Oteil, like I said, Oteil cut demos. So everything was to a click track. And so everyone was wearing headphones. So mainly so they could hear Oteil's vocal, the scratch or this demo vocal as to guide the tune.
Right.
But even with that, when you have everyone's amp in the room, even with headphones, I noticed that everyone kind of mixes themselves. So when it literally comes time to, I just push up the faders at the console during tracking, and then again during mixing, it's like, it's just it's such a great balance already. Yeah,
because people are playing, they're controlling their own levels and how they play.
Exactly, because, you as a drummer, you can only play so loud before you yourself drown out the bass amp that's near you or the guitar amp or whatever,
right.
So, yeah, so everyone, they just self-mix and again, it doesn't work for every record, but
what do you think you might have done if you didn't have a demo vocal to guide the track? So the click and the demo vocal can be a solution as far as keeping everybody, in the lane of the song as you're recording.
Well, that actually did happen for one song in particular. Oteil we didn't use the demo vocal for some reason. I don't know if maybe we didn't have it or we maybe changed the arrangement of the tune, but I just set up a RE20 and he just sang. Again, we still recorded to a click track. So and
why click? What was it about a click that you guys said this is the right way to do it?
He just, it's kind of funny, like there wasn't any other reason other than that's how the demos started. He just preferred recording to a click. We weren't flying choruses or there was pretty much no editing going on where I needed things to be exactly in time. The guys and the other thing is all the guys, who are playing are just incredible musicians. You listen to that record. If I told you there was no click, you'd be like, oh yeah, of course. It doesn't, you don't know either way,
Yeah.
So they were super comfortable playing with a click track, which always helps, obviously. but it just started off with the demos. So that's the only reason why we stuck with the click track.
What about tempos? Were all the original songs ballads to begin with? Did you guys sort of make them ballads from something that was a little different?
No, no. All well, yeah. I mean, obviously the songs, Oteil's interpretations of the songs are probably a lot different than some of the original Dead songs. But in terms of the tempos, we just use exactly use his exact demo. So he knew the tempos that he wanted those songs to be at, and we stuck with them.
I am massively impressed with iZotope Ozone. I've been mastering a lot of my records recently, and Ozone makes it so easy for me to get a fantastic sound. The mastering assistant will help you get started by measuring your track and suggesting all the settings you need for a professional result based on the genre and EQ curve of your choice. You can even reference a specific song if you want, using simple yet sophisticated modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting. You simply adjust the settings to your own taste, and it sounds incredible. And the magic of master rebalance means you can reach into your mix at the mastering stage and manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums. My bandmates are pretty demanding of my mixes, but now when I send off the masters for approval and get comments back like, "Holy bleep, pristine, damn good mastering, crystal clear, you're a wizard, finally I love my singing, and the drums and bass sound huge," well then I know I'm doing something right. So check out the newest Ozone, RX, and all the other great apps at iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Do you feel like, did you guys discuss this? You know, when you're making a rock record or a pop record or something like that, you might find yourself aware as a band of like, well, we want to make sure we have enough up tempo, some mid tempo, some down, but we have to have the variety, or we want to keep the record in a certain place. I guess every record has a mood. Like a funk record that you might do, it might have a very defined range of tempos, and a ballad record might be important that all the tempos stay down in a very like relaxed. It's almost like you walk into a meditation or like a spa or something. It's like, don't move the tempo up on us where everybody's trying to relax or something. You know?
Pretty much. I mean, it was an album, or it is an album of ballads. So that was the framework we had to, we were working within. So, but there are tunes like, what was it, Mission in the Rain, which is a little, it's a little more upbeat feeling than, most of the tunes. But at that point, really what the I wouldn't even say the challenge, but the sequence of the album was super important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just getting the right feel from song to song. So that's the most important thing if you're working on like an album that's very similar. So in this case, like a ballad album. It's just
what did you guys think about the order in which you record the songs? How do you know which song you're going to start with?
Well, a lot of that, obviously, like I said, it really had to do with who was in the room recording, because there was a very specific the tunes that we were going to have Johnny and Steve on. Again, they came in a few days later, and again so that really just determined on like what was recorded, and really, and then from there it was like, well, what did we feel like doing when we got in the room that day?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Did you find yourself sometimes recording a song more than once, coming back to it again?
No. So that was the other thing, man. So we were there for somewhere between 8 or 9 days. So I had everything mapped out. I have it still written down in one of my notebooks. Like, we knew before we got there which tune, I guess for the most part, we knew which tunes we were going to record on each day. That did change a little bit, but Oteil recorded all the vocals the last 2 days.
Wow.
So we knocked out the whole album, everything, like, rhythm tracks, solos, just everything. And then there were 2 days to do all the vocals.
Wow.
All the lead vocals. We actually used all of his background vocals that he cut on the original demos.
Oh, interesting. I know I wrote down that So Many Roads, there was some BGVs on that one. And I was going to ask you if primarily it seems like the record is single lead vocal.
Exactly.
As the mood. So did you guys discuss that? Did you think let's have a featured, let's just have Oteil as this featured individual, and we're not gonna, like, when what did I write that down on? I forgot which song it was, but one of the tunes, I immediately heard harmony in my head, knowing the Grateful Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, oh, you guys you made the choice. Like, we're not going to go there. We're not introducing harmony. I mean, harmony and the major third on some of those things is part of the original.
Exactly. And that was a big part of, like, making sure it was a departure from that, is definitely making those choices of, all right, well, this is how they did it. Let's choose a different path. Again, also with a big part of it was Oteil's bass subs, his substitutions. So that was a very big part of because some songs are very specific substitutions that create the chord completely changes. The whole vibe of the tune changes from the original. You know what I'm saying? Like, you certain sub, maybe all of a sudden it's what would be a kind of a major sounding up, kind of thing. All of a sudden it's a little darker. And those were in specific places because of the lyrics, So again, in how people, interpret lyrics, it's like, oh, well, that's actually kind of a dark vibe there. Like I'm interpreting that lyric as kind of dark, or like, so let's, paint with a little darker color here. So yeah, there were definitely, like, a lot of intentional choices made to differentiate what this vision, as opposed to what the originals were.
Yeah. And then what about the studio? You guys had a console to work with. Did you still have a house engineer, on your left that you could say, hey, where's the thing? How do you get the plate reverb going, or whatever you wanted to do?
Yeah. So they had a brand new, what is it? The API 2448.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I mean, brand spanking new, and
great sounding board. And
so I didn't know, maybe I did know what console they had in there, but APIs have always been my favorite consoles to work on. Like, just, I mean, whatever, we can go down, Neves are, I've worked on a lot of them.
Especially for a record like this, where you just want that, like, the deep pure lows and just the crystal clear highs and all that.
Yeah. So that was great. The gear they had was pretty incredible. I mean, like, Oteil sang on a vintage U47. We had a vintage U67 as a drum overhead. The mic selection there was just great. I mean, they have a rack of, oh man, the rack of gear was just incredible. I mean, they have, like, the 24 channels of API, but then they also have 24 channels of 1073s in a rack, not so whatever, if you need that vibe for something, but yeah, so the console is great. There's a guy who's like the studio manager, and he's a competent engineer himself, Wade Coleman. And Wade is one of the guys who runs this whole music side of this company. So it's 11 Music. And yeah, so he was there, and he was actually, we were filming the entire time as well.
Oh, wow.
So they have cameras all over the studio, and then they have a few handhelds as well. So yes,
It's so amazing too, like, because you guys really went into the studio very intentionally. I mean, it's like 8 days. You got film crew, I don't know about film crew, but you got film going on. You got the recording. You've got the whole session planned out, and you know, it's probably they knew exactly what they were going to do with the release of the album.
Oh yeah,
as you even went into the studio.
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, that's the great thing about working with artists on that level with that kind of experience. And again, you know, Oteil was at the time was a bass player of Dead and Company. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like it's just different. It's a different level.
Now, have you had a chance to go see him play with Dead and Company or anything like that?
Yeah, Kim and I saw one of the last shows. Well, it's interesting. I actually saw one of the first shows of Dead and Company in Boulder, Colorado, years ago.
Red Rocks? No.
At the CU. It's the football stadium there, in Boulder. Yeah. So I saw one of the very first shows, which was interesting because we both happened to be in town at the same time. So I said, oh, man, let me go check these cats out. And the place was not packed. People were kind of like, and it was, you have to remember that was early on. It was like, John Mayer. There was a lot of people were, there was a lot of question marks, I'll say,
Right.
But
it was a new thing. It was it was a real shift. But
yeah. But it was cool.
It seemed like it seemed to thrive, and I think I saw a version of that at Bonnaroo too when those guys were there too. But I mean, I grew up with this stuff, so to me, there's some version of the Grateful Dead always in my periphery. Something's happening,
Right. But I'll tell you this though, man. So Kim and I went to go see them at Fenway just recently for one of the last shows, and that was completely different. That place was jam-packed. And man, it was a pretty good show. They had Jay Lane playing drums along with Mickey. So that was a little different. But it was good. It was good. The vibe in there was incredible, man. Yeah. So
dude, I went to 5 Grateful Dead shows in my time.
Oh, wow.
Two of them were in Paris, back-to-back nights.
Wow.
And it was when I was traveling and backpacking, and it was always fun. Like the scene just felt great, and everybody was just really excited.
So Liz, this is the one thing, man. And again, man, I don't dwell on the past. I kind of wish that because the Dead, I learned one of the towns that kind of had historically good shows, I guess, was actually in Buffalo at Rich Stadium back in the day. And I remember when they'd be in town, because how couldn't you know they were in town, But the one thing I've learned among many things, but man, the whole community, the Grateful Dead, the whole community, man, it's beautiful, man. So, and I say that because I remember leading up to the release of the single of this, and I was like, I feel like this is as much I was as excited as if it was just my release, right. I was just really excited, but I almost have like this, like PTSD. I don't in terms of releases, and then you get the, especially with like certain bands I've been in, like if you put like one album out, people are loving it, then you try and do something different, and then, oh man, people let you have it. You know what I'm saying? Though, whatever. I don't trip on it. But the great thing about I just started getting hit up by people after the single came out, and the album as well. And I every once in a while I'd read some comments, from Oteil's IG, or like Bobby Weir posted about the album, and a lot of people were posting about it. The most beautiful comments I've ever read. You know what I mean? Like, it was just beautiful, like so much support. And that was like the one thing that, again, being early, I know I'm jumping around, but I am tying this all together. Is like in the early days of Soulive, we got, as with many other bands, got kind of clumped into the jam band thing, right? And I'm always like, man, we're not a jam band. We're doing this and this and that. But the one thing that that always struck me, even in the Moon Boot days with my early memories of meeting a lot of Dead fans, man, any band could be on stage. You're talking about like a festival, right? You know, and a bunch of Dead fans are there. They dig everything.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? There was so much support. They'd be out there dancing for like a reggae band or a folk band or a funk band or a jazz group. It didn't matter. There was just so much love for the music and the experience. And I that's the one thing I kind of I'm able to really see and appreciate now that I just didn't when I was younger. You know what I mean? I was like, man, these guys, it was so much about me and like not being a part of that scene.
Right.
When it was like, man, I probably missed out on a lot of just great experiences because
you
of
probably missed out on some good hacky sack circles. That's all I can tell you, man.
Yeah. But that again, just being kind of brought into this community, like into this whole world, really, like at the high, like I'm, like again, Oteil's my brother, right? Like,
yeah.
But I also recognize that, like, wow, man, I've been brought in at kind of one of the highest levels that you can be a part of this community. So to really be able to see the reaction to it and just the love, it's just been incredible, man. It's just again, I say with the most sincerity, like this changed the trajectory of my life, man. You know what I mean? Like just how I see things and how I experience things, just so much love now. You know what I mean?
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you're going into this thing at a height of a career moment, and yet you still have to perform one of the roles that can be pretty terrifying, which is helping to guide a vocalist on their vocal journey on the, I don't know. So I guess there's a few questions that go with this. What would you like to share about Oteil finding his voice for this record? Did some of that happen with you as the producer engineer role at the session? I mean, it was the demo part too. And then what about stuff like just vocal range and getting comfortable with that and making decisions about keys? Was that something you were involved in?
No, not in the decision of keys. Oteil, that had already been set. Some of these tunes that he had performed with Dead and Company, others he hadn't. But again, the demos were just great. His vocals, even the lead vocals with the demos were really good.
Yeah. But so he's already in a comfort zone.
Pretty much. Now, again, and Oteil could definitely like explain this a lot better than me, this part, but I can elaborate a little bit. Again, this album of ballads, and how Oteil explains this. I mentioned earlier how his brother Kofi passed away. Colonel Bruce Hampton passed away, and unfortunately Oteil wasn't there that night when that happened. A lot of our friends were, because it was kind of.
I do remember when that happened. Yeah.
And so Oteil had his father. There were a lot of people who had passed away in his life. So this album for him was a way to kind of release, kind of grieve and just release. So with that said, and he was hoping that the listener could use this as hopefully in the same fashion, So it was when we got to those last 2 days, it was a very emotional. The whole ride was emotional. You know what I mean? Like I remember when we recorded Standing on the Moon, that was recorded in one take because I was in the control room and those guys were out there. Again, the vocals were in the headphones and this and that. And so I'm just standing there listening, and I literally broke down and started crying. Like it hit me so hard because I started, so Oteil came in, Oteil's crying after the take. And because I went into the room, I was like, guys, that's it. This is the one. Like, there's no need to do another take. This is it. And Oteil, after that, Oteil and I went in the kitchen, which is the lounge, and we were just like hanging out talking, and we're both like hugging and crying because I just remember saying, oh man, and only if my father were alive to see what I'm doing now. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he was talking about his father. It was an emotional moment, man.
Yeah.
So
I can feel that, man, because my dad never got to see any of this stuff I'm doing.
Man, so it was heavy. So like I said, when we got to the last 2 days and he had to sing all this stuff, man, it's amazing that he did all those vocals in those 2 days, because there were a lot of moments where he just broke down in tears. Like we all were, because a certain line would just hit. So okay, so we have that part of it, right? And then you also have someone who, again, like I said, was singing for the first time as a lead singer on an album. Who doesn't sing, like, he wasn't the lead singer in Dead & Company or in the Allman Brothers. I mean, he'd sing a song a night or whatever. So all of a sudden you're asking someone to sing an album's worth of music in 2 days.
Yeah.
That's a lot for a seasoned singer.
And you're at the end of a long week and you're traveling and you're in Iceland and you don't want somebody to lose their voice.
Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because he had kind of been getting over like some kind of cold. So it was in there. Like, so on top of like, he was like coughing stuff up in between takes not even in between takes, just lines.
Yeah.
But so I noticed we got going and I had a really great line of sight. I could see him out there. And I just had like the U47 kind of up a bit. You could kind of see in the video, like if anyone checks it out, like, so, so you have to kind of open up. You have to stand up a bit, you know what I mean? But I noticed that his arms were down, you know what I mean? And I was like, yo, Oteil, and I just like came up to him in the headphones. I was like, yo, use your hands. Like, use your arms, use your hands. I said, just like, and I use this with vocalists a lot. It's like, when Oteil, I was like, when you play the bass, you don't even have to play the bass. You can just mimic it just in the air. You play air guitar. You know where all you know your intervals. You know where all the notes are just by moving your hand, right? Do the same thing with if you're singing like, up high, grab, put your arms up, reach up, find that note, and so
I'm doing it now.
Yeah, exactly, man. You know what I'm saying? So it was like this whole thing. So all of a sudden he was hitting all the intervals with his hands, and that what that also does is it just opens you up, opens up your chest, your core, you know what I mean? And again, like, and in this album, it's an emotional thing. You want to be open, like. And once he did that, we were rolling, man. It was just like a light bulb for him. No one had ever explained that to him, you know what I mean? And that's just that feels good for me as a producer to kind of impart that kind of knowledge onto someone. And I know now, if he records we have plans to do more albums, but even if he goes off and records with someone else, that's ingrained, you know what I mean? He knows to do that now, you know what I mean? And
it's pretty cool that you gave him permission to be a rock star in the studio.
Man, that's what we're here to do, right?
Yeah. So, and that's one of those things that I remember discovering too. And it makes a huge difference. Just as a reveal, when I record the ads for the podcast, my hands are all over the place. I'm like phrasing every word, and punching the microphone, and I'm getting pissed off because I'm like, microphone was in the way, it just ruined my take.
Yeah.
But that is it's such an opening kind of thing, and the vocals are so revealing. Like, you can hide nothing from the vocals when they're just out there, and so like every little detail like that becomes transparent, and you see right through it.
Exactly.
Another part of the question. This is a tough question. When you're that intimate with the process and you're working with somebody who's at such an important stage and vulnerable stage of doing this, how do you have a discussion about, the dangerous topics like tuning vocals afterwards or anything like that. How does that even come up? Did you guys discuss that kind of stuff? Is that just like do whatever you're going to do and just see how it goes? What do you want to say about that stuff?
So honestly, it wasn't a huge conversation. There was just the goal. There were some tuned vocals. I'll say that right up front because Oteil was cool with it. He was like, "Man, can you tune that?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, cool, whatever. No big deal." It was more so it was about emotional content. You know what I mean? Like that's all it's about. Everything else, whatever we had to do on the technical side and there wasn't much. I didn't have to do much in terms of on the technical side of mixing or whatever, but there was no, I just remember at one point, like Oteil saying something and we listened back. He was like, "Oh, you think you could tune that maybe or something?" I was like, "Yeah, cool." That was the only time it was brought up. So, and when I got back to mixing, I didn't tell him like, "Oh, I tuned this vocal." I just like whatever it needed. I just did it. I sent it to him. He was like, "Sounds great. Cool."
Yeah. And if you didn't like something, just say you didn't like something.
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at that. Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session." Close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the Ultimate Snare Mixing Trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. Yeah, that's good. And then even as I'm asking the question, I realize that the way I'm asking it and the kind of question I'm asking is based on fear.
Right.
And so therefore it's automatically, the answer is just don't be afraid.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't make records based on fear.
Man, you should. Yeah, we really shouldn't do anything based on fear, But I agree with you, man. And again, it just goes. Oteil is just an incredible musician, incredible person. All those guys are, and I listen to your podcast all the time, man. Like, and it comes.
But tell us about your new ride that you listen to the podcast in.
Well, I try. The engine's a little, you talk about thresholds. Like I try to get above the noise floor. I guess that's better. The better put. So yeah, my 2007 Mustang GT. Yeah, it's
nice. That's your new mix reference on wheels.
Yeah, if I could hear it in that thing, and we're good to go.
The bass always sounds good in there because it's coming from the engine.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man.
Well, tell us about. So you brought this stuff back. Talk about the mixing process. How did you how did you mix it? What did you discover in mixing it that became like, this is where the answer lies, that kind of stuff?
Well, the one thing I was worried about was, I wanted to make sure I had all the files, of course, everything was cool. That I did. But was I going to have the same, I was over there, he had this beautiful room, the API, you had the ATCs that you're monitoring on. It's just, everything was just like, it just felt so good. It was it literally just felt incredible. So I was like, am I going to have the same feeling when I get back here? That was my only worry. And so I got back here At the time, I had my my LP6s in here. Now I still have those in here, but I have my Blue Skies behind me now that I brought from Ironwax. But I mixed on the LP6s, and I was just like, oh, I was so worried. I was like, all right, man, just hit spacebar, just do it. I hit spacebar, and I was like, oh man, this is amazing. It sounded exactly the same. I had felt exactly the same. You know what I'm saying? So big up. So I'll say this: big up to Cali Audio. I don't do a lot of shout outs, but I'm telling you this, man. I had some incredible ATCs over in Iceland, and I mixed that album on these LP6s, and it gave me the same feeling. You know what I mean? I didn't have I didn't have to interpolate things. My brain didn't have to adjust. You know what I mean? It just sounded and felt exactly the same. So with that said, there wasn't a lot to do.
And were you in Pro Tools, or were you?
I was in Pro Tools
using Studio One.
No, I was in Pro Tools. Oh, so Liz. So yeah, you'll dig that. So I knew because you knew I was like rocking Studio One for a long time at Ironwax.
Yeah.
So then I was like, all right, man. Well, I'm going over to Iceland. They have Pro Tools over there, which I've used over the years. That's no big deal. It's just, it's just kind of like riding a bike. It's kind of get. But I was like, all right, well, am I gonna track in Pro Tools and then bring it back over here and then bounce get everything put in the Studio One, this and that? It's like, nah, man. So I just like, all right, I'm going back to Pro Tools, which I'm really glad I did. It just made it easier, it's just
just
less,
learn it.
Yeah, less steps, what I'm saying? So yeah, I was mixing in Pro Tools, I just like built my mix template as I always do, which is basically the same as the one in Studio One.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I mean, you want to reveal some of the things that would have gone in your mix template for this?
Yeah. I mean, basically my mix template, I went down a Michael Brower wormhole one time. And, and if people don't know who Michael Brower is, they should check his name out and check his work and
check out his podcast episode on Recording Studio Rockstars.
There you go. So exactly, man. So that exactly. So I went and I downloaded his template and all this kind of stuff, and I realized that wow, this just doesn't work for me. So and I encourage all the rock stars to do that. Like you don't have to necessarily download his template, but there's a lot of mixers out there.
Yeah.
Have
and that's episode 300, Rockstars.
Yes,
RSR 300.
Check it out because it's a great episode. Great episode. But I encourage all the rock stars to check out other people's workflows because it's so easy now. But keep in mind, you don't have to use it as is. If there's one thing you take from it and add to your own, that's a win. So anyway, what I got from Michael Brower's way of doing things is how he calibrates his compressors on buses. So I kind of came up with my own version of what he does, you know what I mean? And it works really great. So basically it's very simple. I have a drum bus, bass, but the drums and bass bus feed a bus called B. So basically it's a combination of the drums and bass. So I can if I want to, get rid of some low end, or if I want to EQ the bass or filter the bass and drums together, I could just do it that way. Whatever. Guitar bus, organ bus, key bus. I have a strings bus, percussion bus, lead vocal bus, background vocals bus, and then I have all my reverbs and delays. And each bus has various compressors and kind of flavor plugins that I dig using, like True Iron, not True Iron, but there's True Iron. Yeah, True Iron.
Like Kazrock or whatever it's
called.
Yeah,
exactly. So True Iron's on all my buses. And then each bus has a compressor or maybe two based on what I like them to do. But again, all those compressors are calibrated for a dB of compression. So really, I just mix into those buses, and then I do have some stuff on my 2 mix, the 2 bus, but I don't really touch the compressors. They're just kind of set it and forget it, and just kind of how hard you push into it, or how many tracks you have, because it's the drums bus in particular is. It reacts way differently if you just have one microphone recording the drums, or if you have like 8 or 10. There's just more tracks. There's, just more information going into those buses. So it just reacts differently. So anyway, not to go too far down the wormhole, but that's the basis of my mix situation.
We love wormholes.
All right, cool. Yeah, man.
But so a dB of compression. So that means like you've got these buses set up and you're feeding stuff into it, but your goal is for that needle to move about a dB, not much more than that. Hopefully not much less than that.
Man, I mean, to be honest, sometimes my drums, like I don't really look at the needles. I listen, but if I do sometimes, or you also can see like in Pro Tools, you can see like the amount of gain reduction like on the fader there, and I'll look over. I'm like, whoo, that is like lit up. It sounds good though, so whatever.
Yeah. And that's the thing you discover about templates is sometimes you need to do some mixes until you're like, all right, that seemed to work for that thing, and now you just import that over into this next song mix and push the faders up into that sound.
Exactly.
And then it adds up for you.
Exactly. And to be honest, I use the same mix template for everything I do. Every style, it doesn't matter what style of music it is. It just doesn't matter. It works. And I know it works is the reason why I know it works is because the artists, give me I get the green light. If it sounds good to them, that's all that matters, Yeah. So in terms of Oteil's album, I just got, I got the tracking session, I brought everything into my mix template and pushed the faders up. And that's kind of where I start, I listen. I don't do any, I don't want to say any, very, very rarely do I use the solo button. I just like to mix, with in context, I can hear everything. So I'm making decisions based on, what I'm hearing and what I'm reacting to, and in terms of the drums, and then I should say each channel like kick, snare, whatever, I have presets, my own, there's just plugins all set up and ready to go. And a lot of times EQ points that I dig. And I have an API EQ and pretty much everything. And I just know just things that work for me, right?
API outboard EQ?
No. Nah, man, bro, I'm not rolling like that. No, plugins, man.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I've been leaning heavily on Slate's version of the,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And then did you find yourself wanting or trying a little bit to sort of recreate that API console that you had?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So my mix template is basically my version of an API console. You know what I mean? It's heavily API. But what I noticed was I was like turning a lot of that stuff off. Because it was already cooked in to the tracks.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like I EQ'd on the way in. So like it just had the vibe. So that was the interesting thing. Like many of the plugins I use normally, I just removed and it actually sounded better. It just, cause it's already there. So there was just less for me to do. A lot of it was just balancing, and panning, and that was pretty much it, man.
One of the questions I had about panning was actually the strings. So I can find which song it was, but I can't read through my notes that fast. But there was one of the tracks where you had, and I guess that was Jason who did the strings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it sounded like maybe you just did like a little collection of strings and just panned it to the left, and a little collection of strings and panned it to the right. And it was a cool way to just have like kind of a big string feel, but it also left the center open for Oteil. And I imagine a lot of your decisions were like, don't stick anybody, don't have anybody step on his toes. This is his vocal moment,
Well, exactly, man. So I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day about when Michael Jackson passed away years ago. And I kind of dove back into Off the Wall and Thriller. But I had new ears. I grew up listening to those albums, but all of a sudden I was listening to them and I realized the genius of Quincy Jones's production. And that those albums, there wasn't a lot of in terms of harmony, there's not like a lot of big things playing big chords, like Hammond organs, and Rhodes, or piano, like there was a lot of just lines, doom, 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 the guitarist was playing a line, like keyboards are playing a line. But more importantly though, I realized why they did that. It was all to leave room for Michael's vocal. So things are, so Bruce Sweetian was like, had things, he obviously did a lot of stereo recording of instruments, right, but there was so much room in the middle for Michael's vocal. So, and I, ever since I made that connection, I live by it. Yeah. I mean, you listen to any of my recordings, man. And I have a very, when I come to panning, I'm kind of like an LCR kind of guy, but more, I look at it as say if you're in Pro Tools, you have 0 or center and you can go left 100 or right 100. But I like using increments of like basically like 25, 50, 75, and 100. And I very rarely stray from those points. So for instance, I used to pan things like really hard, like 100, put a guitar over here and then a keyboard that was working with it, or another guitar, for instance, but something that's kind of playing in the similar patterns or whatever, 100. But then I realized, man, let me put these at like 1550, or say if I have stereo drums, I'll do stereo drums like 50, the overheads 50, and then like the floor tom at 50 or whatever, and I'll keep the rack up the middle, or maybe to 25 the opposite direction. But the thing for me, I'm a very like visual person when it comes to mixing and listening to music. So I sometimes listen to these recordings and, man, the drums are super wide, but I just feel like everything is living inside of the drums then. You know what I mean? Like if you have the drums pan 100 and 100, then everything has to live inside of the drums. So in my mind, that makes the experience smaller, rather than a lot of times I like on Oteil's album, those are mono drums or mono, one single overhead. And then I think I panned the toms are panned. The toms are panned. But again, the floor tom is probably panned at 50. So what I'm getting at is I imagine I generally like to keep 100 left and 100 right for like effects or like room, like the sound of like a plate or a reverb or something like that, like it just widens, like it's like a painting, you know what I mean?
This podcast is proud to present Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I master my own records using nothing but plugins. Plus, I take you into a world-class mastering studio, Sterling Sound, to meet with Ryan Smith and hear how he professionally mastered my record Skadoosh for release to streaming platforms. That's the music you hear on this podcast, Rockstars. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free mixing course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even upload to your website if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy to get started now. Yeah, it's kind of cool picturing what you're describing. If you think about our stereo image as a stage,
right?
And then you're like, all right, the drums are in the middle of the stage and they're mono, or they're maybe a little wider than mono, and then the stage extends far to the left and the right. That creates an image. You put the instruments out on the right and left. But if the drums are panned all the way to the right and the left, and you say everything's living within it, it's almost as if you took your camera and you zoomed all the way in so that all you see is the drums, which is actually a much smaller picture.
Exactly. So that's one thing I always dig hearing people say, oh, man, your recordings sound so wide and so big or whatever. But the other thing, I don't do a lot of like stereo instruments. You know what I mean? Like even with organ, I'll mic top left, top right, and the bottom, but I always keep it mono. I keep them straight up. But so in this case, not all the time, but most times, I'll have the organ over right 50, guitar left 50. You know what I'm saying? So they were like working with each other. You know what I'm saying?
Now, what about the piano? Did you have the piano be a little bit a wider one so that it's center, yes, but around his voice?
Yes. So the piano was cut with keyscape. That wasn't actually and there's two reasons.
That's a sound module?
Yeah. It's a Spectrasonics keyscape.
Oh, yeah.
So there's two reasons why. One, when that initial call with Oteil, he was asking about, because he was cutting in Logic and he was just using like some piano and Logic or whatever. I was like, bro, you need to get keyscape if you're going to be doing this. So he got that. So all of the piano sounds were exactly, in terms of the sound, were exactly what he used in his demos. I brought my keyscape rig with me. So we just looked, what tune is this? I use this piano, I use this setting, cool. We use that and Jason just played it. But you're correct. I mean, with the piano, I did, that was for the most part, a stereo instrument. You know what I'm saying? And because I just dug the sound. A lot of it is, to me, it's just balance. I mean, obviously that's what we're supposed to do in mixing, or not supposed to, but that's what I like to do. So
we're balance engineers.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of times if I have like two guitars going, like left and like, I just like, okay, put one over there, one over there. What else is left? Okay, well, we have this piano. Well, cool. It sounded good, kind of spread, and then it just, I didn't do any carving out. It just happened to work. The chords that Jason was playing, just worked. It kept the middle open for Oteil's vocal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But melodically too.
Exactly. But so yeah, you're right. With the strings, Jason brought a 4-string, a really old, like it was like from the 1800s, like it's his baby.
Wow.
And then he had a 6-string violin. So again, that's when you mentioned cello or whatever, but that was the 6-string. So
the extra strings gives you a
exactly,
lower string,
yeah, exactly,
like viola.
Yep, exactly. So and all I had was a Coles 4038, a single Coles 4038 above him, looking down, just like an overhead, and he would just stand there and play. Okay, next part. So in that case, I think what you're referring to was both instruments, both violins, but I kept the 1800s one over on one side and the 6-string over on another side. You know what I'm saying?
Cool.
Again, I just like working that way. It just makes sense to me. And with that said, whenever I'm tracking, I'm already mixing. So I knew where things were going to be panned. As soon as we started tracking, I was like, I'm going to put this here, I'm going to put this here. So when the cats come into the control room and listen, they're like, oh, it sounds like a record. You know what I mean? Like it's, So I just brought that same panning. I mean, it was done on the console, but I already knew what I had done. So I just brought that into in the box here.
It's amazing how much power there is in panning and how effective it can be when we're really thoughtful about what it all means. Because sometimes, you know, when you don't think, you just default to like, is it in the middle? Is it all the way? You know, is it full stereo? And then you just have all these instruments on top of each other. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, man. And honestly, that's why I set those, you know, those rules for myself. I call it like the dollar rule. Or, you know what I mean? It's like the 25 cent, 50 cent, 75 cent, 100. You know what I'm saying? Like I just stick with those. And it just, for me, it just makes it easier to make a decision. You know, it keeps things rolling. I can act on instinct. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I just know where this guitar is. I know where this Rhodes is going to go. I know, you know, I just know. Background vocals, a lot of times I'll put it 25 on either side. And I'll keep, if it's a group of background vocals, I'll keep them all together. Because I again, in my mind, I see a group of people singing together. I don't see them like standing on two sides of the sound stage. You know what I mean? Like, so again, but I want them close to the lead vocal. You know, so
it's like the Andrews sisters.
Yeah.
Picture the three women standing right there as a group.
Exactly.
A group.
Exactly. So whatever, man. Everybody has their way of doing things, but I just know it works because nobody's complained yet. You know.
Yeah. Nice. Well, just so nobody complains about this length of the podcast, I guess unfortunately we're arriving near the end of our show. But let me just ask you this question. You also have had some other fun records going on this year. Anything you want to give a shout out to? I know you've got maybe a new Soulive record coming up. You did Crushed Velvet.
Oh, yeah.
Give a shout out to your own project there.
Yeah, man. No, I've been working out of this. Yeah, we have a new Soulive record that's going to be coming out in 2024 because it's Soulive's 25th anniversary. So we have a mini documentary coming out with, you know, that we made, that was filmed while we were recording. So I've been working at this really cool studio. It's called 1357 Recording Studio up here in Western Mass. It's really comfortable spot, great place to work. So I've been working out there quite a bit. So anyway,
that's the one we were talking about. It's like a church.
No, that's another spot. Yeah.
That's another spot.
Yeah, that's another spot. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, 1357 is a really cool spot, very comfortable, man. Great gear, great vibe. So yeah, we did the Soulive record there. I just released some new Alan Evans trio stuff, which was a lot of fun. You know, that was actually like the polar opposite of like Oteil's album. You know, that was like one microphone on the drums. The concept of that album was like, I didn't have any intention of recording a new AE3 album. But one day I was sitting around, I was like, no, I just want another little challenge. I was like, well, what if I record something in the same fashion I used to, like on tape? So I was like, all right, what if I just give myself 8 tracks? What am I going to do with that? I was like, all right, 1 track per instrument. So I did, you know, a U77 on the drums. And then I did a bass DI. Guitar was in 1 track. So that's 3 tracks. Organ, 3 mics summed to 1 track. That's 4. And then, you know, vocals. So, or whatever, you know. So that was fun, you know, but stuff like that works when the music makes sense with you know what I'm saying, you know. So I think you heard the track, you know, and it's in the playlist so people can check it out, you know.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
But yeah, man, I mean, just working. And again, I'm working on a lot of the thing that I've been loving the most, man, is just working with other people, you know, and helping other people kind of like see their visions through. You know, I've had an amazing career. You know, we talked about, I'm not touring anymore, you know, as a musician. I do like once a year with Soulive and that's it. So it's fun to, it's just not about me anymore, you know, and it's been so fulfilling, man, you know, like just like to help other people. I've gained all this knowledge and I'm constantly gaining knowledge. I'm always learning, you know, but just to help other people, be in the studio with other people when they have those like light bulb moments, or something I say or, do that just kind of sparks some a moment of creativity or learning or discovery. Man, it really doesn't get any better than that. So
right on, man. Well, dude, it's always a pleasure to hang with you on Recording Studio Rockstars. Thanks again for coming and sharing all that amazing stories of going to Iceland and working with Oteil. These are great. Love hearing that stuff. Where do you want the Rockstars to go? I think you even revamped your website and everything. Where do you want the Rockstars to go to check out your stuff? And what if they're ready to make their next hit record?
Man, I'm easy to find. It's AlanEvansMusic.com, or on IG or on Facebook. You can just find me, Alan Evans Music. And yeah, I got a big shout out to your brother from another podcast, Matt Boudreau. Man, he had a discussion with Kim actually one day about a lot of things having to do with my business, and one of them was like, man, I was doing the Ironwax thing, and he was like, look, man, people are coming to you to record, you know what I'm saying, not the studio. And so again, big shout out to Matt for like really pushing me to finally feel comfortable and just like, okay, yeah, it's Alan Evans Music, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not gonna hide. I'm not hiding anymore. So
that's awesome. I didn't know you guys had that conversation. That's cool. And it's so true. It's important for us to remember that when we do great things with our music and in life, dating, whatever, if you step back and look at it, it's like you brought a lot to that equation. Don't always assume that you were just lucky to be there.
Exactly, man. Just be yourself.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, dude, great to see you, man. We didn't really get a chance to talk about it, but Rockstars, Al and I, every time we're chatting, we're like, man, we need to do an event, do a clinic, get everybody into the studio or something like that. So give us a shout out, Rockstars, and let us know if you'd like us to do something. I don't know if we're doing it up in Massachusetts, somewhere cool, but if you guys want to hit the studio with us and learn from Al about recording, see these mix templates, talk about making great records, we'll put something together.
Let's do it, people. Come on.
All right, dude. Great to see you, man.
Too,
thanks for listening, Rockstars. Al, see you in the studio.
Bye, bro.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible: Lewitt, Grace Design, Adam Audio, Native Instruments, and Isotope. And remember, at isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes below, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio because they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Wasilchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.